Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're gonna find out how well this old GTX 1050 4GB laptop version performs in late 2022. But before that, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe down below, and thank you for watching. Alrighty then, so before I begin with this video, I'd like to ask everyone for a small favor. Please go ahead and hit that like button down below. It really helps to grow the channel and I appreciate it very much. Also, if you're new to my channel, please do consider subscribing. I have tons of videos to watch. And also, very important, this is for all of you, whether you're subscribed or you're considering to subscribe to my channel. It's very important that you go ahead and hit all the bell notifications, especially if you're using the YouTube app, as I'm sure you're well aware. Now everybody is using the mobile YouTube app for majority of the viewing out there. So it's very important that you hit the bell notification. That way you can receive all the latest videos coming from my channel. So without further ado, let's begin. Alright, so let's talk about the GTX 1050 4GB version that was exclusively made for the gaming laptops. Now this particular laptop that I'm using to test out here is the Dell Inspiron 5577 gaming laptop, which consists of an i5 7300HQ processor, 4 cores, 4 threads, max turbo frequency 3.5 gigahertz. But to be honest, I was never able to achieve those clock speeds at any point, not even for a second. Also, this laptop comes with 16 gigs of DDR4 RAM running at 2666 megahertz, and for the main drive I have a 256 gigabyte M.2 NVMe, and secondary a laptop 2.5 inch 1 terabyte extra storage. So pretty much everything you're gonna need to test out this old GPU here. And as always, I recommend using a cooling pad because this beast gets really hot. If you've seen all my previous videos, you know I'm using this Cooler Master cooling pad. It does help out with the temperatures, as well as having this bad boy here plugged in to the charger. You will get a lot better performance, and in some cases, if you're really cutting it short, you could barely run the game, and you plug this in, chances are this will allow you to actually run the game, because without this plugged in, you're not gonna really get good performance at all. Now, this is the 4 gig version, as I mentioned, only exclusive for laptops. And the good thing is, with some of the modern games that do require 4 gigabytes just to start them, this will help you out a lot. Now, you're not gonna get huge performance out of this graphics card, but at least on some lower resolutions, you should be able to run some of the more high-end games. So this, at this point, this graphics card does support the latest drivers, so you're able to play any game out there. Of course, you would have to tweak it to a much lower resolution. Now, as far as the performance comparison to this mobile GPU here, I would compare it to a GTX 750 Ti 2GB version on the desktop, about the similar performance. But of course, this is a newer GPU, and it will allow you to play more of the modern games versus like the older ones. As you know, the drivers, even though you might get the latest drivers, they're really not supporting the latest games, and that's unfortunate. So that's what I'm going to show you in this video, how well this old beast still runs with some of the more harder games to run. So without further ado, let's get into those gaming test benchmarks. So stay tuned. Alright, so the first game I'm going to start off with is Cyberpunk 2077, and unfortunately this game is barely playable on this graphics card. So everything is on the lowest possible settings, and even using the dynamic fidelity FX option on, setting it to 80% to maximum resolution, we are still barely getting 30 FPS, and that's very unfortunate. And yes, the resolution is at 1080p, but of course we are using the dynamic option here just to get a couple of more FPS, because if you run it straight up on 1080p, it's like low 20s and the game is completely unplayable, and that is unfortunate. So let's take a look what we have here. Yep, this is it. And don't forget, I have this laptop here plugged into the wall, number one. Number two, I have all the maximum power settings on in the NVIDIA control panel, as well as in the laptop running on the maximum performance option. And I have this graphics card overclocked, that's right, by 100 megs on the core and 200 megs on the memory clock. And still, I'm getting, this is just barely 30 FPS. So that kind of tells you all the things you would have to do just to get it to 30 FPS average or so. A lot of work. And that's not even the full 1080p resolution. I personally don't believe in the Fidelity X or any of the other stuff, because you're not really getting the true resolution that you should. So it doesn't count in my book, but that's really your opinion on that, of course. But nevertheless, with all the tweaks, all the nook and crannies, get the game to play around 30 FPS. And really, looking over all the games that I'm testing in this video, the conclusion comes that a low-end gaming laptop like this is pretty much going to be very close to the Ryzen 7 APU laptops that are out there. Pretty much you're going to get very similar results if you tweak everything right, except it takes a lot less power.
Of course I was.
Now, in quite a few games, you will still outperform the latest Ryzen 7 APU laptops, which are really fantastic in my opinion for what they are. But if you could get a good deal on an old laptop like this, which is now about what, 5 years old at least, and you could still squeeze a lot of juice out of this. Okay, so that concludes Cyberpunk 2077. Let's jump into the next game. Now, when it comes to Fortnite, this graphics card performs pretty well, I would say. But I did forget to mention earlier in this video that if you have this laptop in the i7 version along with this graphics card, it would perform a lot better in some of the games, especially a game like this. And this is where I notice a little bit of bottleneck here, because on paper and in other instances I should be able to get higher FPS and more stable FPS, and that's what you're gonna see here. So what I'm running here is 1080p full screen on the very lowest settings using the performance beta rendering mode here. And again, the FPS seem to be there, but I'm noticing a lot of frame drops, a lot of stuttering and inconsistency. And if you take a look at the CPU usage, we're pretty high up there, and that's one of the main reasons why it's a bit unstable. And I actually do have the same version, an Asus one with an i7 7700 HQ, I believe, with the 1050 4GB GPU there. And later on sometime in the future I will make a video on that too, to see how much better performance I'm gonna get with that 4 cores and 8 threads, which I do think a game like this, it would definitely help out, where the CPU usage is a bit too high, cutting it real close here. But as you could see, it's still running pretty good. You got the high frame rates, definitely enjoyable. And once again, as I mentioned in the previous game here that I was testing, this is overclocked. 100 megs on the core and 200 megs on the memory. And it's plugged in. All the power options maxed out. And so this is what you could expect. I think it performs quite well. I'm just trying to run away here. I'm not looking to fight. And nobody cares, of course. They see a target, they're gonna come after it. I got no bullets. Oh, I see. That's a pretty cool move, how he just sucks me back in. Alright, that's it for Fortnite. On to the next game. So with Halo Infinite, you could barely get away with playable FPS on 1080p. Of course, you would have to turn every single setting down, and that's what I did. We're on the very lowest of the lowest. There you go. And here is what it looks like. So we're around low 40s with some dips under, but nevertheless it is still quite playable. And that's what I want to show you, that this laptop is still capable of 1080p gaming. Of course, you jump down to 720, you'll get closer to 60 FPS. So once again, if you get an old laptop like this for a good price, around 200 bucks maybe, I think it's still worth it. Now of course, if you score the i7 version of this, it'll be even better. And of course, when it comes to emulators or some of the fighting games, you'll do even better. Everything seems to be good here, and in this case you could see that the GPU is working pretty good, about 99%, and the i5 seems to be just fine for a game like this. Alright, so that concludes Halo. Let's see what else we have left. One more game, and then you should be able to draw your own conclusion. Is the GTX 1050 still useful in late 2022? Alright, so I'm going to end this video with one last game, Elden Rings. And yet again, I was able to achieve 1080p playable FPS. So let's take a look at the settings. Full screen 1080p, and that's right everybody. Lowest of the lowest. Every option to the lowest possible setting. and with these are completely off, just to achieve decent playable FPS. Here you have it. Now, don't be excited about these frame rates, because inside you do get a higher FPS, but once you come out, it's a big difference. Then we're going to be somewhere in the 30s. But nevertheless, it is still quite playable. Not bad at all. And in some cases, you'd probably still be able to tweak it a little bit and get a little bit better quality graphics. But I think the lowest preset, with every option on low and others turned off, you will get reasonable frame rates. And let's take a look here really quick what our true frame rates are once we're in the actual open world. And yes, like I said, we're gonna be, you know, 40s, and yeah, not bad actually. So let's recap what we have going on here. So yes, this laptop is still, this GPU is still viable in late 2022, but you do have to do some work. You're definitely gonna have to have the power brick plugged in to get the maximum performance, and that really goes on for any other laptops out there too, whether they're new or old. Also, having a nice cooling pad help out too, to keep the temperatures down, as well as having this card overclocked does give a pretty good performance boost. I'd say about 10 to 15% easily. That's what I'm noticing. And in your NVIDIA control panel settings, turn the GPU power settings to the maximum, as well as your power options for the in Windows 10 to maximum performance as well, and you could squeeze out some decent FPS out of this old system, out of this old graphics card. Yep. So I would still recommend this. The architecture is still good enough, and the latest drivers work just perfect with this. I would think from my previous tests in the 960M laptop, the drivers, even though I was able to get the latest drivers, they weren't compatible with some of the newer games. The DirectX 12 was not compatible, the version, with some of the newer games. So definitely you don't want to go any lower than the 10 series when it comes to the gaming laptops. So that's it. That concludes the video. I hope to see you guys again. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe down below. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.